So can you explain to me about Padgett, and because I believe that his wife died or passed, and communicated with him, and he used to write down her communications.
Correct, yes. He was a man who existed in the late 19th century, early 20th century. He passed in 1923, I think it was. And in around 1914, or just before 1914, his wife passed. And his wife entered the spirit world. He was very distressed at his wife's passing, and as a result, he started going through a lot of emotions. Now, he was a lawyer, but he had always had a mediumistic ability. And we had known of his mediumistic ability for a long time, which we often do when you're a spirit. When you're a spirit, you're looking at the earth frequently and going, there's another mediumistic person, there's another mediumistic person, and you're hoping at some point that they'll engage their ability. But most people don't finish up engaging their ability for all sorts of reasons. But Padgett, through the death of his wife, decided to try to engage the ability, because he was told when he went to a medium, another medium, that he had the ability to automatic write, which was the ability to transmit messages from spirits by writing them down. And so Padgett decided, in his grief, he decided to try this with his wife. And his wife started channeling material to him, or giving him material that he wrote down. And so he wrote down quite a number of messages. And then he decided to talk to his wife about where she was. And so he found out where she was, and he found out that she was actually quite bound to him on earth. And he'd always had a belief that you shouldn't do that you should move on in the spirit world, you should discover new things. And so he encouraged his wife to discover new things. So here we have a man on earth who firstly connected to his wife in the spirit world because of his grief, but eventually he's trying to convince his wife, who's in the spirit world, to try to discover new things rather than just resting on old beliefs. And his wife decided to engage that. So she went to Padgett's grandmother, who had been in the spirit world for quite a long time. Now, Padgett's grandmother and I met many years prior to this. She passed as a Christian. She eventually worked out that many of her Christian beliefs on earth were incorrect. And so she eventually asked Jesus to come to her to talk to her about what is the truth about the Christian beliefs. And because I often receive such requests in the spirit world, I went to her. I decided to go to her and talk to her. And so we met. And in the process of meeting, we developed a friendship, of course, as you do with people who you talk with eventually. And so Padgett's grandmother knew me personally. And it's not something that a lot of spirits in her condition could claim, because it was not frequent for a person under the celestial spheres to know me personally in the spirit world. They might have seen me at a distance, but many don't know me personally, and I haven't had a personal conversation with them. So in her case, I had. So when Helen Padgett, James' wife, went to his grandmother and found out, that she'd been conversing with me, she found out also a lot about the divine truth, which she started to put into practice. This, of course, meant that she started channeling this kind of material to Padgett. She started talking to him about her experiences, which, of course, piqued his interest because he had always been interested in Christian religion. He was I forget now what faith he was actually, but I think it was a uniting or something related to the Uniting Church, but I'm not certain at this point. But she I can't remember, but it's probably not that important. But she conversed with him about his belief systems, and eventually she brought me to him, to channel to him, which of course he didn't believe it in the first instance, and he actually screwed up the message and threw it in the bin. And there were a number of messages, in fact, that I channeled to him that he didn't keep, that he believed it was just somebody claiming to be me or whatever. But eventually we managed to bring to him a lot of people who confirmed that he knew personally, who confirmed that I was actually writing messages to him. So eventually we got to the point where he most of the time trusted that I was writing messages to him when I was writing messages. And so this gave me the ability to channel through this handwriting large amounts of material that I had not previously been able to put back on earth since the 1st century. And since there was a large amount of distortion from the Bible over many, many centuries of what I actually taught, this enabled me to correct many of the things that I wanted to see corrected on earth without me having to come to earth, which I'd always been wanting to do, but I hadn't yet discovered how to do. So this was before 1935, by the time myself and Mary had discovered how to return to earth. So we wanted to give this material to the earth, and we felt the only possible way to give the material to the earth was to find the person who was willing to channel the material, but also willing to channel the material we gave them rather than channel their own, write down their own ideas, Now, while Padgett did often write down some of his own ideas, we managed to channel a quite significant portion of material to him about divine love and about divine truth and about how God interacts with people and the fact that God is not a punishing God and God's only a God of love, and that, we managed to correct many conceptions. But unfortunately, because of his emotional condition at the time, he was quite a shy person about these matters, so he didn't speak openly very often about what he was doing. A lot of the material never got shared, and so to our frustration, when you say frustration, it was like we wanted it shared, but nobody was sharing it. And as a result, it nearly actually completely died, with the exception of another man who was a friend of his, a doctor, who got the material and eventually published it nearly 40 years later. And so now we're talking like years after we channeled the material, it was eventually published and put into published form. And it's very interesting to me because it also helped me with my memories of other things in this life. So it's actually interesting in the sense that it almost turned out to be a message or a letter from myself to myself. How spooky does that get? And so it's helped me a lot in terms of remembering everything about my life and working my way through specific issues. And a lot of people claim that I only teach what's in the Padgett Messages, which is not true. I have a vast majority of information that I teach has never been recorded in the Padgett Messages. But obviously I have a deep love for them because they are messages that I channeled to a man on earth over 100 years ago now, or close to 100 years ago now.
Fascinating. So you hadn't added that side, have you?
They're worth reading, actually.
Yeah, I would love to.
There's 2,000.
Are the originals anywhere?
Yes, I have a friend in the States who has about 90% of the originals. And he's in the process at the moment of scanning them or photographing them, and eventually we hope to put them on the internet, all the originals, all the original handwriting.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be
from 100 years ago, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
From my perspective, just to see like an original.
Yeah. The way it works originally is that there's a flow, it's understandable words, but there's no punctuation. So it's very hard to read. There's no punctuation, there's no full stops, there's no commas, he was writing flat out, and we were giving him a lot of information. So he was writing flat out, and he didn't have time to stop for punctuation, capitalization, any of those kind of things. So it just all like flows, and then the doctor eventually got all of the messages and did the painstaking labor of typing them, actually, putting them in type eventually, and putting them, punctuating them, and all sorts of things like that. So it was some time. That's why it took him so many years, because he did it almost alone without much assistance.
What's the book called?
You can actually buy them on the net now. Some of them are called the Padgett Messages. There's a number of different versions of them now from different editors. So there's an editor called Joseph Babinski, and he's made a complete library of many of the messages. There's some of the editors are from 30 years ago, so there's a whole series of books. Some of them are called The True Gospel of Jesus.
Right.
Some of them are called angelic revelations of divine truth. They're all named or differently, but they're all basically messages. The best way to read them, I feel, is in chronological order. And the person who's done them in chronological order he's an editor in the States called Joseph Babinski.
And does any of the books actually have like a scan of actually what the real writing looks like?
I think he has included at the back of one of the books some scans of what it looked like. Yeah. But eventually what we want to do is actually get the original and then we want to get the edited version and put them side by side on the net. Yeah. But that's a project that a man in the States called Michael Bailey is working on voluntarily, so it's taking him some time. But we'll see him again in a few months' time, so we'll see how he's going with it. But I think he's got almost 90% of it complete. So, yeah. But it's a big job. There's altogether it's close to 2,000 messages from all sorts of spirits. And I think altogether there's nearly 8,000 or 9,000 pages of text.
Gosh.
And it's all, some of it's crumbling, some of it's been treated fairly badly. It's 100 years old. So it's all, from 1914 to 1923.
Okay.
Get a couple there, sorry, let's change the album Ninja battery.
Okay.
There's also other books that are interesting to read too that you'd probably be fascinated reading actually. There's a whole series of books that were channeled in the 19th century, the 20th century again, by another man called Robert James Lees that contain a lot of divine truth as well, and he channeled those over a period of 31 years, and they have also been now edited by Joseph Babinski and put into, and they're books by Robert James Lees, and they're called Through the Mists, The Life Elysium, and The Gate of Heaven.
Okay.
I've got them on PDF if you want.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. I've got all the Padgett messages on PDF if you want. They're all downloadable from our website.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's just to see the writing. I'd love to see the writing, the actual...
Yeah, I don't know if I've got any shots of the writing. I've got a few of them somewhere. Yeah. But I can't...
So how long did it actually take to... because obviously he was writing, but for how long were you giving the messages? Or?
Well, it was interesting what happened because he went through emotional phases where he was quite clear, and then other times when he was not that clear.
Right.
And when he was not that clear, it sort of distorted the message so much that we had to stop channeling. And we'd tell him, look, mate, you know, you're not that clear. You know, like, you have to get into a better condition.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not going to be able to go so far. Now, what happened was that his best condition was shortly after his wife's death and when he worked through some emotions. And that was sort of from 1915 to 1916. And then in 1917, he started getting back involved being a lawyer. He was a lawyer all that time, but he started working a lot more, working nights, working weekends. He got involved with another woman eventually. And as all of those things happened, he channeled less and less, and his condition wasn't that great for channeling. So from 1917 onwards, the messages, the clarity and our ability to transmit clearly to him degraded. Until the time about 1919, I could not channel to him anymore after that without him distorting every message. So,
right.
And almost everything that was said in the message. So I stopped channeling to him earlier than other spirits stopped channeling to him. I think the very last recorded message was 1923, but that was from other people.
Right.
Yeah.